Welcome to the Art of Pilates. I'm Louise Taube, principal trainer. I am a studio owner and a Pilates teacher, and I train teachers as well. If you'd like to connect with me, you can visit my website for teachers at taubepilates.com. If you're wanting to check out my studio, it's louisetaubepilates.com. And here is part 2, interview with Professor Belinda Beck, Building Bones Takes Guts. And if there's a topic on the podcast that you'd love to hear about, please let me know.
The answer to the question, will O'Neill help me not have to go on meds, is some people, yes. Actually, some people, we see this amazing increase in BMD, which raises up, puts them into the normal zone and protects them. Some people who are very, very low, it might take too long to get you into that safe zone, so you actually might need both.
At some stage, probably in the next 5 or so years, you're going to want to consider coming off Prolia, and that will mean doing something else to replace it. So going on Prolia does largely condemn you to having to be on meds then forever. Quite often these days, they'll put people on a bisphosphonate to prevent the loss that occurs when you come off Prolia. But those things are still being shaken out, and everybody is furiously hoping for another drug that will come along and won't have side effects and will be just as effective. That is a big pharma sort of a situation, and they are always looking for drugs. There's a new one on the market at the moment, relatively new, which is marketed as Evenity, which is quite effective. You only are supposed to be on it for about 18 months. And people who have a family history of heart disease, maybe it's contraindicated. So it is a very fraught topic. There are not that many people who are dying to go on meds. A lot of people come to the clinic because they don't want to go on meds. So the answer to the question, will O'Neill help me not have to go on meds, is some people, yes. Actually, some people, we see this amazing increase in BMD, which raises up, puts them into the normal zone and protects them. Some people who are very, very low, it might take too long to get you into that safe zone, so you actually might need both.
And that's what I'm thinking. If you have both, wouldn't the exercise be a protective factor for that, so that you don't get that massive drop in bone loss if you stop taking the medication? Like if you are loading up the bones and the muscles, would that mean that you might not have such a dramatic drop if you stopped taking the Prolia?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because we do have some data that suggests that might be the case, that doing O'Neill, if you stopped Prolia, it might mute that loss. We've got a little bit of anecdotal data, data that we've just sort of seen through observation of people doing it. What is needed is a trial. To actually test that. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to get the funding to do a formal trial for that. But I really do think that is a very sensible way to manage it. My mantra is, there is no circumstance where exercise is not going to help. That's a double negative. It basically means that exercise helps everybody for everything, not just bone. And in particular, it's going to help people stop falling. The testimonials, the feedback I get from people at the clinic is just uniformly positive. I came to the clinic for my bone health. I'm staying for everything else. I've never felt this great. I feel so strong. I can do all these things that I haven't been able to do for the last 30 years. The strengthening of muscle is gold.
Absolutely. And I just loved hearing all of those amazing testimonials from people who went through you and O'Neill. And it's just like Joseph Pilates' book, Return to Life. It's like they're returning to life. So, it's a way, for me, it feels like it's about becoming younger as you're getting older. So it really has that rejuvenation effect. I mean, it's got like reversing the clock in a way if you're able to build bone. Like, it's quite incredible.
Well, we had one of the local TV stations came to do a story at the clinic, and I had one of our clients was interviewed, and I was just listening to what she was saying, and, we hadn't asked her to say anything. We just wanted her to give her natural responses to the reporter. And halfway through, she said, "Oh, and another thing, I used to have a really bad back pain. and it's gone.
Wow.
You couldn't script that.
Oh my God.
And we also hear people saying, I was really worried that when I came here, I've got really bad knee osteoarthritis and I didn't think I'd be able to do it. 6 months down the track, my knee is feeling so much better and I can do so many things that I haven't been able to do. It's not a miracle. It's not like it's going to completely reverse, a grade 4 knee osteoarthritis. That's crazy. But it can certainly improve your symptoms, making your muscles much stronger around the joint so they start to protect it. And the loading is really healthy for joint cartilage.
Yeah. And also the endorphins of lifting those weights as well. Like exercise makes you feel great. And if you feel stronger, then as you're getting stronger, it has a double whammy effect. I think the whole psychology of it as well really can make such a massive difference too. With the osteoporosis, where would people mainly break their bones? And like with neuro, do you focus on those areas where people would be breaking their bones?
So bone loss happens everywhere except maybe the skull. And so everywhere is susceptible to a fracture. But it just so happens that the places that are most likely to fracture are the ones that are most susceptible to trauma. And so, for example, probably the most common is a wrist fracture. If someone falls over, lands on an outstretched arm, the place that gives is this weak radius, the end of your forearm. That's a classic signal fracture for osteoporosis. The other place then is the spine. And the problem is we have this amazing spine that is really well adapted to the movements that we do and upright walking, but actually it developed in quadrupeds. And so it used to be supported front and back. Now we're standing upright. All the load goes directly through it in a different sort of direction. And it is susceptible to injury. So putting a load on it suddenly when it is weak does risk a fracture. For example, lifting a heavy bag of pudding mix or a heavy grandchild, in a position that is not specifically loading from top to bottom, which is the safest way to lift. Lifting with your arms out in front and lifting this way, that puts very big forces on your spine. Most of us have a spine that is strong enough for that, but if you've got osteoporosis, it's possible that you don't. Now, the problem at the spine is the fractures often happen at the front of the bone. And so you get a wedge-shaped fracture there, and that causes that spine deformity of the sort of the stooped kyphosis, they call it, the dowager's hump at the top of the spine. So those kinds of fractures. And then, of course, the big nasty one, which is a hip fracture. And hip fracture is normally, as I mentioned, in response to a fall, falling directly onto the side of the hip, and the neck of the femur fractures typically, or somewhere around there. And of course, if you've got a broken thigh, you can't walk. And so you end up in bed. That's really bad for all sorts of other tissues. And oftentimes, if somebody is quite old, they end up in a nursing home because they can't live independently. And mortality after a hip fracture is actually increased even if you're as young as 50, but particularly if you're 90 and have a hip fracture, mortality is almost 100% in 6 months. So it's a devastating fracture. And those are the three most common, but you can also have humerus fractures, your upper arm, you can have pelvic fractures, anywhere can fracture. Those are the three most common.
Oh, actually, my mum's had a couple of rib cage fractures. Parts of her ribs have fractured, but she hasn't actually fractured anything else, just the bones in her ribs, which would be quite painful breathing.
Very, very painful, very inconvenient, because it's not like you're stressing your ribs every breath, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, what happens to, because in Pilates, it's so important to be able to breathe deeply to the lower lobes of the lungs. So that becomes a real focus, I think, as we age, to make sure you have that breath. And then just as you're talking about that kyphosis that comes in, is that going to affect our internal organs?
Kyphosis and that curvature does encroach on the thoracic capacity. And what's going to happen when that happens is it pushes down on the abdominal contents underneath the diaphragm. And so everything pushes out. And so somebody who might be a very slim little old lady suddenly can't fit into their trousers anymore, not because they've put on any fat, but because their their stomach just is pushed out further. So also
There's nowhere for it to go.
that's right. And that stooping position also moves your center of gravity, and so you are more at risk of falling. Plus, the position of your head is angled down, so you have less peripheral vision to be able to see things coming at you. All of these things increase your risk of falling even more. And even things like most of us have a dressing gown, like a long dressing gown. If you're suddenly stooped over or you've lost height because you've had a full compression fracture in your spine, and I do know people who have lost 9 centimeters of height because of fractures, suddenly that dressing gown is dragging on the floor, and that's a trip hazard. So the whole thing is a very vicious cycle of increasing risk of falls and fracture.
My God, absolutely terrifying.
A quick word from our sponsor, Taube Pilates. If you're a Pilates teacher wanting to confidently support your perimenopause and menopausal clients, please join me for my Mastering Perimenopause and Menopause with Pilates course. This evidence-based informed course gives you all the tools you need to work with perimenopause and menopause women. So we address bone health, pelvic floor function, strength, balance, and the many changes that women go through at this time in their life. As a listener to Art of Pilates, you can get a discount of 25% off with discount code HOTFLUSH25. So visit taubepilates.com to see this course.
Going back to the skull is highly unlikely to fracture. What about the jaw and the teeth? Because I'm just thinking, are you more likely to need more dental work? I know I feel like as I get older, I'm going to need more dental work. I just have that feeling. But is that just because my teeth are getting older, or will I need more dental work because the bones in my mouth, in my teeth, have lost density?
Oh, that's probably unlikely as long as you continue to eat foods that require chewing. If you go to a very soft food diet, then what you're doing is unloading the bones in your jaw. So the maxilla and the mandible require pressure from the occlusion of your teeth to maintain their size. So that's a mechanical signal as well. And that's why if you lose a tooth, you should always get it replaced by an implant or something so that the bottom tooth or the top tooth, whichever one it is, can then provide that occlusion force and continue to put load on the bone where the tooth has been lost. So that's very important. You might be familiar with, it doesn't happen as much anymore because dental care is much better, but in the old days when old people would lose all their teeth and they'd have that very gummy, very almost a caved in appearance, that's because the bone resorbs if there's no teeth there to push against. So the most important thing, keep eating good crunchy salads and nuts and foods that cause that loading in your mouth.
Yeah, well, I think I'm so healthy because I have 2 smoothies a day and I think, oh, I'm being so healthy. But then I was thinking, oh my God, you don't chew a smoothie ever. Now I'm making a point of getting some carrots and some steaks. So I actually chew.
And celery and all that crunchy vegetables.
Yeah. And can some medications actually cause osteoporosis?
There's 2 types of medicines that I'm aware of that are very bad for bone. And the first is steroids. So an anti-inflammatory, a strong anti-inflammatory like prednisone or Dex, are those things that are very important for inflammatory conditions and can be life-saving. Very important to be on them. But if you are on them, your doctor probably needs to also either prescribe a bone medicine that will help preserve the bone, or a neuro or some other method of trying to maintain your bone mass. The other thing that is really bad for bone are the aromatase inhibitors that people are often put on if they have cancer. So those are devastating for bone. So people often will survive breast cancer because of treatment. It's obviously very important that you take your meds for breast cancer. And then they'll go, but now I've got osteoporosis. And we see people like that at the clinic all the time. And we are actually able to help them and rescue and bring their bones back up. So yeah, are definitely some drugs that are bad for bone.
Now, are there any indicators for osteoporosis, like any actual symptoms? Like I've heard it be called a silent disease. We don't know you've got it until you fall over and break a bone. But surely there must be some other indicators that you might have Although I know some people are quite shocked when they get their DEXA scan results back, but is there anything else that might be an indicator?
So probably the best indicator are your parents and your grandparents. So it's genes again. And then the next indicator will be if you're losing height, if you have developing a kyphosis. Those are the only real ways to tell. There's nothing else that can really tell you that you're developing osteoporosis unless you have X-ray eyes.
My God. What about in terms of, like, I know diet is really important, like making sure you have that, full range of foods that have calcium and fiber and everything else. What about alcohol? Will that help our bones?
Yeah, there's some wishful thinking.
Yeah.
There are not too many things that alcohol and smoking are good for. I don't think there's much evidence that a little bit of alcohol, like a small glass of wine a day, is going to be harmful. But there is plenty of evidence that alcoholics have very bad bones. And I also think there's some evidence, particularly in Australia and possibly other countries where alcohol is very much part of our social fabric, like the UK and Russia, and where people don't realize quite how much they're drinking until it's brought to their attention. And so, many of the women who come to the clinic, when we ask them how much they're drinking, they don't tell us the truth because they go, you know what, I open a bottle of wine every single day and I actually end up drinking most of that wine because my husband doesn't really like it. Now, if you're drinking a bottle of wine a day, that's quite a lot. So it's good to assess how much you're drinking because particularly if you drink over a couple of hours, it might not seem a lot, but actually it probably is not good for your bones. And of course, smoking, nicotine, not good for anything. Ever.
Now, so you mentioned before life expectancy, if you break a hip in your 90s within 6 months. So is that a general sort of thing? Like if you have osteoporosis, would you generally say that your life expectancy is going to be shorter because of that?
Well, if you from an epidemiological standpoint, I suppose yes. If you put the population, the statistics together, that is what the data would suggest, because your mortality actually increases with any kind of fracture. But these are not necessarily causal. It possibly means there are other things that are going on with you that are comorbid, or they happen simultaneously with osteoporosis because the same things can be related to them. For example, sarcopenia, loss of muscle, inactivity, chronic inactivity is going to influence how much muscle you have and how much bone you have. If your bones are weak because of it, they're going to fracture more easily. If you have very little muscle in your lower extremities, you're going to fall more. So together, it's that they call it osteosarcopenia. That's just compounds your risk.
Whoa. Now, is there any exercises we should not be doing? Like, is there anything that's going to, break our bones accidentally? Should we be not doing curl ups? Like, what should we not do?
Yeah, well, certainly deep forward flexion. So the very yoga posing, lying your trunk along the front of your thighs, that's off the table. It's not necessary. If you need flexibility in your hamstrings, do a different kind of stretch. There's no need to fold yourself over, roll your spine forward. That's just going to increase your risk of one of those little wedge fractures that I talked about. And there is some evidence, not for Pilates, but for yoga, that yoga can increase vertebral fractures if people do those particular poses. So,
like the standing roll down, I'm just thinking of, the standing roll down. Don't give that to my clients, if they're as they're aging. I sort of try to get rid of all those flexion-based exercises. But some people just love them. So, yeah, what should I be telling them if they're there doing a standing roll down and in a studio environment?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. With abundance of caution, I typically would avoid. You want to maintain a neutral spine. If somebody has low bone mass, is at risk of fracture. But there's no need to make people scared of moving. That would be really So alternatives to that, there are other things that you could probably give them. But yeah, the forward flexion, the extremes in forward flexion is probably not wise, particularly if loaded. But extension, trunk extension, very good.
Yeah, I try and do a lot of trunk extension.
Yeah, if you've got an emphasis on balance, that is absolutely one of the arrows in your quiver of prevention of fracture, staying on your feet. So yeah, those weight-bearing exercises are probably great for that.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there different stages of osteoporosis, or is it just like, I know there's osteopenia and osteoporosis, but is it kind of like, and then severe osteoporosis, or is it just,
Not really stages, because it is a continuum, of from very strong bone to very, very weak bone. And there's no hard sort of definitive divisions between stages. The difference in definition of osteopenia and osteoporosis just based on the T-score from DEXA, osteopenia being a bit of a warning flag, that you are in the danger zone. You're not eligible for PBS reimbursement of the bone drugs yet. But once you're over into the minus 2.5 in osteoporosis, then you are. And that means that you are at higher risk. But interestingly, most people, just because of the distribution of the population, there are many more people with osteopenia than osteoporosis. And that means that actually most of the fractures happen when people only have osteopenia, just by virtue of the fact that there are more people with osteopenia. So don't be lulled into a false sense of security by somebody saying, oh, it's okay, you've only got osteopenia. You are still at increased risk of fracture, and you still need to be doing something about it.
Now, Belinda, how can people get in contact with you and find out more about Onero and that kind of thing?
Well, there's a couple of ways. Probably if there's somebody who wants to do Onero, if they're in Brisbane, then they can contact the bone clinic and we can get them sorted. We're horribly busy and have a big waiting list at the moment, but I'm taking steps to fix that. We have classes from 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. So we've got lots of opportunity for beginners classes and all sorts of things. But if you don't live near us, just Google Onero locations and a map will come up, and you zoom in on your area. And if you see a little tag that's got an Onero dot on it, and some of them say stop fracture, I won't bore you with why that is, but they're still Onero providers. If you click on the tag, a drop down will tell you exactly where they are, and that person can deliver Onero to you. If there's nobody anywhere near you, then still reach out to us, and you can just email the reception at the bone clinic, and we can give you other things, other ways that we can help you. Maybe a telehealth appointment. You can talk to the dietitian. There is an online program which is not Onero, even though it's called Onero Online, and that might be helpful for you.
Where did the name Onero come from? Like, I was always thinking, what? I just don't understand. What does it mean? Something?
It does mean something. In Latin, it means overload.
Oh my God! Now it's all clear.
I know you think if I really wanted to sell something, I would have bone in the name, but I'm not a businesswoman. I'm a scientist.
Well, you've got the bone clinic, so that kind of makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, wow. I have just been so looking forward to this interview for such a long time now. I've been so excited to actually talk to you. I just think what you've done is it's world breaking, like it's science breaking. It's just absolutely fantastic and giving so many people so much more hope and just change the outcomes for so many more people. And I just think it's fantastic. I've just really loved having a chat.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to Art of Pilates. I'm your host, Louise Taube, principal trainer as recognised with the PAA, studio owner and Pilates teacher. To stay connected, please subscribe to my mailing list via my website, taubepilates.com. And if you've loved this show, please give me a review. I'd love a Facebook review or a Google review. It really helps to support me and my business and this podcast. See you next time, and keep moving with intention.